Hi, and welcome to Coping During the COVID Crisis. I'm Janet Gross. As we all work our way through this new normal, getting back to work for some, attempting to get out more and more, maybe even travel, we're all struggling with how to do this safely. If you're thinking about going somewhere else, especially a longer trip to another state, there are a lot of decisions to make and maybe some stress and anxiety that will go along with you. Dr. Roy Salgado, professor of counseling at the University of Holy Cross, is here to talk about that with us today. Okay, I know some people are, looking ahead and planning trips to other places out of state.
It's summertime. It's summertime and people travel. People take vacations and people go to the beach and they go to the mountains and they go to different parts of the country around the world. This year it's a little different. You have to take some things into consideration before even deciding to leave the state of Louisiana. If you decide to go to Mississippi or to Alabama or to Florida or any other part of the country, you really need to do some homework and you really need to have some conversations with your family to determine if and when it's appropriate for you to travel. Under what circumstances is one permitted to travel, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of these questions that you're saying, the discussions should probably, include the question, do I need to?
Right. Do I need to? And what does that mean, right? Is it due to visit a family member who needs your assistance in another state, perhaps a parent? Is it a business situation where you have to travel out of the state because of it's part of your livelihood? Or is the need simply a little R&R, having to get away because you've been cloistered for the past several months? Needs are going to vary from person to person and from family to family. But depending on what that need is, that you do it in an informed fashion and that you don't compromise yourself or anyone else for that matter. Here in Louisiana, here in New Orleans, we were a hot spot back in March and April. And we don't want to be responsible for taking whatever it is that may have been taking place here and bringing it to somebody else. Nor if we go to another state, do we want to go to a hot spot that's kind of going into their peak right now and then bringing it back to our communities here. We don't want to do that. And so we want to be very purposeful and intentional and mindful of those things and do our homework when we decide to visit a particular place.
Because even early on, like you said, even at some borders, people are saying, oh, well, you're from that place where it's bad. We don't want you here.
Yeah.
And that is still happening in some places.
Yeah, different states are saying, oh, you're from the southeast Louisiana area. We don't necessarily want you here, or you need to quarantine for 14 days before you go out into the community. And you need to be aware of that. If you're going somewhere, you need to know what the regulations and the guidelines are for that particular region, because it even varies from state to state. You might go to one part of a given state where they're a little more lax because they haven't had a peak, they haven't had a spike, they aren't a hot spot, but yet there is a hot spot in a given state, and then they might require that you not go at all or quarantine if you are there for 14 days. Or if you come from a hot spot, like we had at one time been, they might say you need to quarantine before you come. So there's all sorts of different things that you need to take into consideration before you even hit the road or catch a plane to go to wherever.
And a lot of these things you can find out online. You can just Google it. Like I was looking this week in New York, and they have like an agreement between some states that if you go there from any place else, you have to quarantine.
Right.
So it's not just a quick trip. Fun. You guys put 14 days on.
And those of us, here in the New Orleans area in southeast Louisiana, we may be taking trips to Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida mainly. And I'll use those states. Texas. I'll use those states as an example because just in my own personal experience with people that I know, people are going to those states. They simply are, and it's a reality. And it's important that we have these discussions. Okay, if you go to those states, you don't want to have something and bring it to them, nor do you want to go there and then if they have something, bring it back, because different states have different ways of approaching things. Alabama looks one way, Mississippi looks another, Florida yet looks a different way. Actually, South Florida looks different than the Panhandle. And so just knowing that, and that you go and you are respectful of yourself, of your community, of your family, so as to help slow the spread. And if you do decide to travel, then there are certain things that you need to put into place. For example, if you're driving, that you don't make as frequent stops as you perhaps would, that you are very intentional with the stops, what you're going to do, what you're going to touch, washing your hands, getting in and out of the car, that you minimize contact as much as possible in different areas, in particular in areas with which you're not familiar. If you're staying in a hotel, of looking at the accommodations and the guidelines for that particular hotel. Are there areas that are not going to be opened to you because they're closed? Certain common areas. Maybe they're not serving a continental breakfast like perhaps they had in the past. Mm-hmm. You want to know these things beforehand because you don't want a trip to be impacted in a way that you weren't expected. If you order room service, they might have a situation where they are not offering room service, or they're not offering turn down service, that they're only going to clean the room after you have vacated the room altogether, so as to mitigate contact between yourself and the staff. You want to know all of these different things, and you want to welcome those things. If you're going to a place, you want to be able to have some distance, that 6 feet of distance between yourself and others as much as possible, so that you don't spread the disease if you happen to be asymptomatic and have it and not know it, or contract it if somebody in that area does.
Right, and so knowing those hygiene procedures for, it's going to be hard to know everything along the way, but you have to do your best to know where you're going.
Right, absolutely.
Where you plan to stop. I remember when when all this started and everybody was trying to get home, and people would be driving, and like some of the places where you would normally stop to use the restroom were closed. They wouldn't let you in.
Right.
So you have to think about things along the way.
And you need to be prepared for things along the way. Have your hygiene kit, carry your hand sanitizer, your soap, perhaps bottles of water to be able to use it if things are closed, toilet paper, paper towels, masks, extra masks. You want to have all these different things at your disposal and that you're responsible for, because you might go to a particular part of the country in another state where that rest area or that gas station just simply does not have it.
Right. Okay, well, we're going to talk more about this and what the University of Holy Cross is offering to help people through some of these anxious times in just a minute. When we come back, we'll get some travel tips about things we probably never had to think about before. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about getting out of town for some R&R maybe, or even a business trip in this COVID world. And we're joined by Dr. Ted Remley, Professor of Counseling Education at the University of Holy Cross. Thanks for joining us.
I'm happy to be here with you today.
Great. And before we get into the conversation, I wanted to say that you are a part of a wonderful service that the University of Holy Cross is offering to really anyone. It's a free teletherapy service. Tell us about it.
Yes, if a person thinks that they need professional help in trying to make decisions or discern how to proceed with a given area in their life, they have a presenting issue and they're struggling with anxiety or depression or any other type of concern, in particular those dealing with COVID-19 right now, we're offering this service free of charge, teletherapy, to individuals in the state of Louisiana. And they can call anytime Monday through Thursday from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. and the administrative assistant will take that call, triage it to the director. The director will assign it to the counselor, and then they'll get a call back and begin receiving services free of charge.
That's so nice. And to offer that free during this time. I know there's usually a nominal charge, but even that has been waived.
Yeah, it's part of the mission of the Mary Knights of Holy Cross to offer this service to the community. It's true for what they've done for the past 100+ years.
Right. Always helping.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. Dr. Ted, Dr. Ted Remley, let's talk about this. How can the counselors help people as they're making these decisions? Because these are, at this point, really important decisions to make in life.
They definitely are. Dr. Salgado knows that I'm a lawyer and a counselor, and the lawyer part of me knows everything. The the counselor part of me knows it's impossible to know everything. And
wow, what's it like in your mind?
well, right now I'll be a counselor.
Okay.
And I think this whole COVID-19 thing has brought people to the realization that it's hard to live with not knowing. And we don't know today whether to go to the grocery store, whether it's safe, or whether to go to a restaurant, or whether to take a trip out of town like you've been talking about. And I think that's something that's distressing. Sometimes people become immobilized. It's just so distressing not to know for sure. And then they don't know what to do. And I think it's sort of a metaphor for counseling, in that we're there for people with any problem, not just depression or schizophrenia or some terrible problem, but everyday problems that interfere with their daily lives. And this free counseling service, I think, is ideal for that, for people who are worried right now.
Sure, because some people might just need somebody to talk it through, to say, I don't know, help me weigh this out. Should I go or shouldn't I? What are the consequences? Those kinds of things.
Right. Just simple everyday problems like that, particularly if it's distressing you. You don't have to do it alone. There's somebody available for you. And the counselors at University of Holy Cross are willing and able to take time with you. Doesn't have to be a long-term relationship. It can just be a few phone calls or a few sessions. I think it's something that a service that we're offering, I think, that is ideal for the COVID-19 crisis.
We are getting recommendations, and sometimes they're mixed messages, but recommendations from government leaders. I know our governor has said, don't go out of state. Just enjoy Louisiana.
Yeah, and there's a point in that, not to go out of state. The governor makes a very good and informed point. That being said, some people perhaps find themselves in the conflict of having to go out of state. Maybe they have an elderly parent in another state that they haven't seen in all these months, and they're having to tend to certain issues. And perhaps a counselor helping them navigate that and to figure out, okay, do I go out of state? Let me find out what the circumstances are there. Let me talk to that family member, see, have they been quarantining? Maybe we can implement a plan where they quarantine for 14 days, I quarantine for 14 days, I get to them, we mitigate the spread of COVID, and every case is going to be different. And a counselor can assess your situation and help you lay out a plan so as to meet the needs that you need to follow through with, and at the same time, not spread it as if you weren't planning it out. Because sometimes if you just make a decision to get in the car and go to another state, you go to Tennessee, you could be putting yourself and others at risk. But if you have a plan in place as to how to proceed more efficiently and more effectively, you're behaving in a more responsible way that can keep everyone safe to the best of your ability and continue to meet those needs of having to travel outside of the state.
Right. And I'm saying the governor said don't go. It wasn't an order. He's just saying you don't have
to. It's a recommendation.
We have plenty of things to look at here, and if you want a vacation in the summer, do it here. But, and to that, Dr. Remley, people are getting mixed messages kind of from their family, from their neighbors, from every time you turn on the television, and oh, look at the spikes over here, look at this. You really have to think this through.
Right. And it's something that until this crisis came along, it wasn't a daily problem, but today it is, and that can become stressful over time. And asking for help doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means that you're exercising good judgment. Having a conversation with a counselor could be very helpful right now. Decision making is difficult today.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you really need to keep in mind as you plan trips like this, as you plan to maybe venture out a little bit and keeping things responsible, keeping yourself responsible for yourself and others?
Yeah, I think that's the part of it is, and that's what counselors do, I think, so well, is we help people look at what the issues are. What are the benefits? What are the downside? What's the possibility? How much is the risk? These are things that I think people are going back and forth with, and as you say, they're getting different advice from different people. So it really comes down to them making a decision for themselves, that whatever is best for that individual person. You can't just go by what somebody tells you to do today, because you're getting different messages, mixed messages.
Are you getting anything from people who are worried about, as they think about the consequences of if they get ill, or if they have someone else get ill in their family, of I don't want to do this, I don't want to risk it, because what if I have to miss 14 days of work, or maybe I'm might have to take care of an elderly person, or that anxiety that comes with that?
I think that's what this is all about, is the anxiety, and how much anxiety is there, and is it putting you in a position where you're not being able to make a decision? And it's real. It's not, we see people on TV in the ICU suffering from COVID-19. I mean, that's very real, and people can't deny that. And at the same time, they need to go to the grocery store, or they need to take a trip to visit relatives. So it's a constant stress right now, which is new for us.
Is it that people just want to see things back to normal, so they normally take a summer vacation, so they want to go? I mean, a lot of us are like, I'm staying here until this moves
right
to another place.
And with that anxiety, that stress that we've been experiencing for several months now, oftentimes the prescription for that is to take a little trip, a little weekend trip, a little getaway, right. And right now it's just, paradoxical, do I take that trip, do I not take the trip, even if it's to reduce some of that anxiety. We're not here to tell you not to do it or to do it. There's recommendations in place. We don't want the spread of COVID-19, but perhaps in your case, a little trip may be something that you could do, but always doing it with others in mind, of keeping yourself and others safe as possible and free from the contagion. Now, if you do decide to take a trip, it's sometimes maybe talking with a counselor. They can talk about the benefits and the risks, to do a risk-benefit analysis for your particular situation, to see if that's something that you should do. And should you go to Mississippi? Should you go to Alabama? Should you go to Florida? Or should I not? It's going to depend on case to case, and it's going to depend on the responsibility level of the individual. What are they willing to do or not willing to do when crossing state lines?
Okay. So I guess that, Dr. Remley, that's something that you can help people talk through, really, to, even if it's a pros and cons list or something.
That's what we often do in counseling. People come to us with they're perplexed, they're not sure, and it's really a simple decision-making process that we help them walk through. And I think it's a very beneficial thing counselors can offer today.
Okay. Well, Dr. Ted Remley, thanks for joining us. We're going to be back in a moment with more ideas on getting out of town safely.
Have you heard about social distancing?
This is very serious. We have to stay home.
Not just to protect yourself, but to protect others.
You don't want to spread the coronavirus in your community.
Stay at least 6 feet away from other people. 2, arm's length.
Staying home helps lower the risk for everyone.
Protect your life, protect your loved ones, and protect the world.
Just because you're at home
doesn't mean that we can't be alone together.
Together.
Taking a trip may not be as easy as before, but you can ease some of the stress about COVID safety. And as we continue this conversation, here to talk with us about that is Dr. Carolyn White, Dean of the College of Counseling at the University of Holy Cross, and she's joining us by phone, which of course, wherever you travel, you can now take your meetings.
That's right.
or your job or whatever else you need. So thank you for taking the time to get on the phone with us today.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for having me.
Sure. And I know that, as in your job, you also travel. So as you make that decision on where you're going to go, I guess you're kind of our expert here this morning, because you're not here and we are. So you make decisions along the way, right?
Well, you do, but it's different now, as everything else is with COVID.
Yeah, a lot of things you would consider today that you wouldn't even have thought about in the days before mid-March, I guess.
That's right. That's right. So much has changed, but people need to get away when they can and when it's safe, because we've been in this stay-at-home mode now for almost 4 months. Mm-hmm. So, it's good psychologically to be able to get out a little bit.
And there's where we were talking with, everybody is talking about balancing that, the need to get away with the safety issues,
right.
with the balance that,
Right.
And that need is there. We've been staying at home for so long now that there is a case to be made for taking a trip. A safecation is a term that I've heard recently. A safecation, mm-hmm. that one does it very intentionally, purposely, and mindfully, and implement new tips prior to hitting the road and going to wherever it is that one may go. One of those tips is determining if the place that you're going to is a hot spot or not. And if it is, second guessing whether you should go or not. And if you do go, under what circumstances.
Okay, so when you were making your decisions on traveling, you obviously looked ahead. Things that you consider to be smart moves, and that if you're talking to a client or someone who just is trying to figure this out, what would you advise them?
Well, definitely to make plans. Again, in the past, you could just kind of get up and say, oh, we're ready to go somewhere this weekend. You really can't do that, or you shouldn't do that, today. You need to look at not only where you're going to end up, but what's along the way. Mm-hmm. So, with states that are increasing their numbers now, it's important to know, can you just travel through that state? Are there places open to stop if you need to? Just making the decision, where are we going to stop to have lunch or to use the restroom? Or, those are decisions that you didn't necessarily have to think about. You just found them along the way. Now you have to make sure that there are rest stops open, or, somewhere where it's convenient and it's safe. And then, of course, using, social distancing and a mask is critical. And we're seeing, even when we stop at a rest stop, about 50% of the people have masks on. Mm-hmm. And that's troubling, when you consider where we are today.
Mm-hmm. And that's something to keep in mind too. You may be leaving a place that is not a hot spot and going to a place that's not a hot spot, but traveling through one where they're going through a peak and acquire something along the way. And now you are running the risk of contaging, if that's a word, two areas, the place that you're going, and then when you come back home, you have to run the risk of spreading that. And so just being mindful along the way, as Dr. White stated.
And that is troubling when you're saying 50%, and I've been places where it's way lower than 25% of people who have the masks on. And it is concerning as you go.
It is, because, there are people that, are walking, and they'll stop and let you pass, or you'll stop and let them pass. And then there are others that don't seem to have, any thought of just walking, right up to you. So if you're not at least protected with a mask, and, if you're driving, we carry hand sanitizer and disinfectant wipes and everything with us in the car, so that we have it right there, and of course our mask. But it's just having to think a little bit more. And
that's very important. You have to have that traveling kit, of that hygiene kit, of your mask that covers your mouth and your nose, the hand sanitizer, the disinfectant wipes, sprays, towels, toilet paper. Just have a kit. I have a kit in my car, with all that stuff in there. I didn't have that before, but now I do, because you never know. If you have to stop and go to use the restroom, you need to be prepared so that you don't contaminate yourself. Contaminate is the word I was looking for earlier, and you don't want to contaminate others along the way.
And you have a spare mask.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah. So just, to help people realize too that, yes, we're moving out of the shutdown, but COVID is still here. A lot of people, I think, are in that denial right now that, I can go anywhere now, and that's not a safe way to think. You have to realize that it's still here, and we have to be very careful.
Right, and as you travel, I think the last thing I heard was like 18 states are rolling back some of their progressive moves,
right,
just because it's getting bad in their
yes,
area. So you have to be
yeah,
you have to make yourself smart about it before you go.
You do, and again, wherever you're going, where are you going to eat? If you're going somewhere where you're going to have to go into a store, what is safe? You might be safe at home, but the state that you're going into may not be, or going through may not be.
Right.
So,
okay.
this is something that I've never experienced, and I know that, we've had other, situations, the polio, for instance, where people had to watch what areas they were going into, but certainly, not in my time that we had to be this alert.
Yeah, right.
That,
Alert is a good word.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where we're going and what we're doing,
Okay.
and to make sure that we're not contributing to.
Exactly. Exactly. The whole problem. Yeah.
Right.
That's correct. That's
Dr.
correct.
White, thank you so much for joining us and talking with us, and we'll let you get off the phone so you can continue your drive. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Dr. Roy, you have some tips for us?
Just once again, we have to inform ourselves. So if we decide to travel, that we know where it is that we're going and whether or not there's a hot spot there or whether there's a spike in cases. We want to make an informed decision with regard to that. Assess our own personal situation. Is this something that is needed for us? Determine the need to travel. Whatever that need may be. Is it R&R? Is it business? Is it to visit family? We need to determine if it's something that is absolutely necessary and make a risk-benefit analysis. Maintain personal hygiene throughout. Have that supply kit so that you can travel through the different states so you can stay healthy and stay clean from viruses, any virus, not just COVID-19. Practice social distancing when you are in these different states. Physical distancing, that's 6 feet of distance between you and another person who is not part of your household. Cover your mouth and nose with a mask when you are in public places, when you are in a rest area, when you are at a gas station, wherever it is that you may be. And this is the way that we can help spread the virus while
Stop
spreading the virus. That's right. Stop spreading the virus while perhaps crossing state lines.
Right, and if you have to do that again, and as we were saying earlier in the show, make sure you check that you can go there and actually do what you want to do.
We have to do our homework.
Yeah, because it's on us, because they're not going to say, oh, you didn't know, that's okay, you can come on in.
Right.
That ain't happening.
Right.
Okay, and one more thing, pack a lunch, I think.
Yes, I would say, yeah. We can't necessarily pull over and eat like we used to just at any particular place. Yeah.
I'm big on packing snacks in the car, so,
Yeah.
but I think you better have a cooler these days, just
Yeah.
so you can make sure you have a place to, get some food.
Because it sure can be long.
That's right. All right, thank you, Dr. Roy Salgado, and everybody at the University of Holy Cross for joining us today, and we thank you for watching. We want to help as we are all coping during the COVID crisis.